There's a version of yourself that you've been managing, suppressing, and apologizing for your whole life. The too much self. Too loud. Too intense. Too distracted. Too emotional. Too impulsive. You've learned to hide it in professional settings, relationships, anywhere you needed to be taken seriously. But what if those parts of you aren't the problem? What if they're the most important parts, just undeveloped and misunderstood? Carl Jung, one of the most important psychologists in history, developed a concept called the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, hidden, or disowned because they didn't fit the image we needed to project to survive. For people with ADHD, the shadow is often enormous because ADHD traits are consistently told to us that they are wrong, shameful, dangerous. So we push them down, and that pushing creates a cost that most people never name, but deeply feel. This video is about naming it. Jung defined the shadow as the unconscious part of the personality that the ego doesn't identify with. Not necessarily evil, just unacknowledged. Everything that we've decided doesn't fit the image of who we're supposed to be gets pushed into the shadow. Over time, the shadow doesn't disappear. It grows. It influences our behavior in ways we can't see directly, showing up as inexplicable reactions, projections onto others, compulsive behaviors, and a persistent sense of something unresolved underneath the surface. For an ADHD adult who has spent years being told their intensity, impulsivity, and emotional expression are inappropriate, those qualities get pushed into shadow. They don't go away. They emerge sideways, as conflict that comes out of nowhere, as shame spirals after making a mistake, as the intense self-criticism that follows any failure. The shadow is always trying to come back to consciousness. If we don't invite it consciously, it finds its own way. Shadow work isn't about becoming worse, it's about becoming whole. The energy that's been going into suppression gets freed, and often what was hidden in the shadow turns out to be genuine strength. Jung also described the persona, the mask we wear for the world. A healthy persona is flexible. We naturally behave differently in different contexts, but a rigid persona, one we can never take off, becomes a prison. For ADHD adults who mask heavily, who learn to mimic neurotypical behavior in order to survive school, work, and relationships, the persona becomes exhausting to maintain. The energy required to perform normal is enormous. And underneath it, the authentic self, with all its intensity and strangeness and genuine gifts, is starving. Masking is the experience of working extremely hard to appear like someone you're not, for long enough that people think that's who you actually are. Many late-diagnosed ADHD adults describe the diagnosis as a profound relief. Not because they were glad to have it, but because it finally explained why maintaining the performance had been so exhausting for so long. The mask was real. The cost was real. And the authentic self underneath was also real and was never actually broken. When you begin to consciously differentiate your persona from your authentic self, to know which behaviors are performance and which are genuinely you, something remarkable happens. You stop burning energy on suppression and start directing it toward actual expression. Jung's approach to shadow integration was not about wallowing in darkness or self-analysis for its own sake. It was about becoming conscious, bringing what was hidden into awareness, looking at it directly, and recognizing it as yours. He called one technique active imagination, a practice of dialoguing with inner figures, images, or rejected parts of yourself as if they were characters in a conversation. It's journaling meets depth psychology. It's simpler than it sounds. And it's a practice that ADHD brains can engage with because it's genuinely interesting, like storytelling from the inside. One simple starting practice. Think of a quality in someone else that bothers you intensely. Not mild irritation, deep, disproportionate reaction. According to Jung, strong reactions to others are often projections of something we've disowned in ourselves. Not always, but often enough to be worth asking. Is there any version of this quality that lives in me, unexpressed, unacknowledged? What would happen if I let it be real? Shadow work is not comfortable, but the alternative, carrying suppressed material indefinitely, is more costly. And the freedom on the other side of even modest shadow integration is profound. The parts of yourself that you've been managing, hiding, and apologizing for are not your worst qualities. They are your most undeveloped ones. The intensity, the impulsivity, the depth of feeling. In shadow, they create chaos. Integrated, they become the source of your most authentic power. This week, notice one moment where you have a strong reaction, irritation, shame, disproportionate emotion. Don't analyze it to death. Just ask, what part of me might this be reflecting? That's the beginning of the conversation. Next video, we're going into Buddhist mindfulness adapted specifically for ADHD brains. The actual practices, not the generic advice. Concrete, specific, and designed for how your mind moves. Subscribe to keep going. And tell me in the comments, what ADHD trait have you spent the most energy hiding? No judgment here.